Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we will have a look at the FIDE World Cup 2021 and this is round 4, Vidit versus Xiong. Two extremely young and talented players against each other. I believe Vidit is like 26-year-old, very strong 2700 player, and Xiong, I believe he's only 20 years old but already a 2700 player. In the game, Xiong makes a very interesting decision, which is to go into a London opening. Striking in the center, e3, now e6, knight b to d2, and now queen to b6. And this is actually a pretty sharp line. This queen is putting pressure on the white's position, and after rook to b1, now since knight to c6 isn't played yet, now bishop to d6 is actually possible, asking for a trade of bishops. White first takes on c5, the queen has to take back, and now as you can see this queen looks a little bit awkward on c5, but in truth it's not really. After something like bishop d3, simply castles, knight to d7, and after b4 simply queen back. In this position black is putting more pressure on the bishop on f4, and Jeffery decides to exchange a pair of bishops. c4 striking in the center and b6 because this bishop on c8 still needs to get developed. Takes on d5, and now you don't really want to take back with the pawn since that pawn would be isolated, which means it's not supported by its own pawns, and also the square before the pawn can be used by white's pieces. Instead, to remain the solid pawn structure, Vidit chose to take back with the queen, which makes a lot of sense, hitting the bishop on d3. Queen to e2, developing the queen and defending the bishop, and now bishop to b7. And in this very position, white goes for a strategy to expand. And so how do you expand? By taking in the center. You need to strike in the center, right? To create more space for your pieces. Vidit goes back, and now knight to c4. So you can see that white is really trying to control the center. Vidit puts his rook on the open file, which is very sensible, and white does exactly the same thing. And now Vidit goes for this plan of rerouting the knight. So this is what we have, h3. Black's plan is completed, and now since this move is being threatened, queen to e3 was played. And now, okay, this bishop isn't doing too much on this diagonal. Actually, this pawn is well defended for now. Vidit decided to put the bishop on a6 for now, where it could be a little bit more effective, but Xiong goes for the very fancy move to actually trade pieces. He goes for d6, and it looks like this knight is simply hanging, right? Can't you simply take it with the rook? No, because then I take your bishop, and that's kind of the trick in this position. Also note that if you take the bishop, then the rook takes, and then the rook would defend the knight. The rook takes on d6, this was played in the game, bishop takes, and now there was a trade of rooks. And now Vidit puts its knight in the center of the board, and after bishop to e2, there are some more exchanges, just like that, and the queen goes back to e5. Queen to c1, black makes some luft for the king, and queen to c6. This queen looks very threatening, but in actual fact, after rook to b8, black's position is very solid, and there's not too much to do for white here in this position. a4, pushing the pawns up the board, very sensible, and now king to f8. a5 takes, and now black goes for the plan to exchange the queens, which makes sense because also black is a little bit more cramped. He would be very happy to trade the queens in this position. Knight d8, a6. Positionally speaking, this is a very nice move by Xiong, because not only is this pawn ready to promote after this pawn is taken, but also this pawn on a7 is now a little bit weak, and there might be plans in the future of rerouting this rook to the b7 square, which would be extremely nice for white. However, the problem is that this pawn is on a dark square and not on a light square, and this means that this light square bishop will have a hard time trying to attack this guy. It's simply gonna be impossible. Black still wants to trade queens, as we know, queen to c7 on the board and queen to a4. Queen to c5, activating the queen, and queen to a1, bringing the knight into the game. And what did I tell you about this rook maybe coming into the game? The rook immediately goes to the 7th rank. King to g8 played by black, and now e5. This pawn might look a little bit weak, but in actual fact it's also strengthening this bishop, because by putting your pawn on the opposite color of your bishop, you're also making your piece better, which is nice. Rook b4, activating the rook, and queen to d1. Knight to b5, and what did I tell you in the very beginning about a rook maybe being able to come down to b7? Well, now it's actually happening. But now since all of black's pieces are getting really active, it's gonna be hard for this rook to coordinate together with all of these pieces to actually do anything in black's camp. Knight to d4, activating the knight even further, and bishop to e4. And in this position you need to know that both Vidit and Xiong, they are pretty low on time, but in this position it's move 37 and they will get an additional 30 minutes after move 40. Basically what's happening in this position is both of these players are trying to play some decent moves, but in actual fact both of these players, they are simply waiting till they get an additional 30 minutes on the clock so that they can actually have a longer think and try to come up with some critical plan. g6 played, queen to d2, and now rook to c4. And this is now move 39 for Jeffery. Just one more move and he would have got an extra 30 minutes on his clock. But in this position, Jeffery made a very critical decision in the game. Bishop takes on g6. And the question is, does it work? Well, let's find out. F takes on g6. In this position, Xiong played queen takes on h6. And believe it or not, but this is actually completely lost for white. According to the engine, what you should play is first rook to b8. And so if black simply goes back just like this, then it's gonna be a repetition. But if black goes to e8, now you can actually take on h6, and this would be still very complex, but this would be more equal. This did of course not happen. Instead, in this position, queen takes was played immediately, but there's a problem with this move. The good thing for Vidit is that actually he has lots of time in this position, and he used his time pretty well to calculate everything very nicely. He started off by giving a check and the king was forced to h2. Queen takes on e5, very nice move, and there is basically only one good way to stop this check, which is by playing f4. And in this position, Vidit calculated for a long time, but finally he came up with an amazing move. So I would like you to pause the video and think a little bit about this position. What would Vidit play? Knight to f3, and it's completely winning for black. So I'll just lead you through all the variations that are possible because it's a very rich position. In the game, king to g3 was played. But first I'll show you what actually happens if you take the knight. In this case, there's a forced variation. Rook to c2, king g3, queen e1, king g4, and simply mate. Instead, after this move, white didn't take the knight, but he went king to g3. Queen to e1. Okay, again, in this position, king to g4 was played, but of course you want to know what happens actually after this move. Well, this is gonna end pretty quickly, simply rook to c3, and after king g4, queen to g3 is mate on the boards. But Xiong tries to escape, and in this position, for black, there are two critical options. You can give check in two different ways. Knight to h2 and knight to e5, and you need to try and understand which one of these two is the better one. So pause the video and try to figure it out. In this position, actually knight to h2 is still fine, but after king g5 it's not gonna be an immediate mate or a clear win for black. Instead, the variation that Vidit chose in this position is knight to e5. And the nice thing is that if you take the knight, which didn't happen in the game by the way, but I just want to show you this, rook to c4, king g5, queen takes on e5, and after king takes, queen f5 is made. Wow. This didn't happen in the game. Instead, king to g5, but after knight to f7, there is simply nothing to do against this. I mean, you need to give up the rook, but now black is simply up a rook, and what to do? In the game, still a few moves were played, but after this, Jeffery Xiong had to resign because there's simply nothing to be done here. Black is simply up a full rook. So what do I think about this game? I think it was a pretty nice game, to be honest. Congrats to Vidit for this amazing win, because really it was amazing. I'm excited for game 2. I hope you enjoyed this game as much as I did. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. That would really mean a lot to me. And as always, I hope to see you guys in the next one. Bye.